Wow. What a ball game. The Super Bowl is final, people. The Kansas City Chiefs are back-to-back champs, the first team to do it since my New England Patriots in the 03-04 era. We are now in the Chiefs dynasty era. It is official. Their third ring with Mahomes, Reed, and Kelsey. It is the opening line report. Yes, we are going to talk about next year's Super Bowl. We're going to get a jump on it, people. We are going to be your first look at the futures odds for Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. I have my man Stu, Monotone Football, joining me to talk about those futures. But before we do, we have to talk about that game. It was really sloppy. It was a punter's duel. It was a kicker's duel. You had Jennings as the Super Bowl favorite for MVP at one point. I kind of thought Chris Conley was the MVP as a gunner at one point. What a crazy game to turn out the way it did at the end of overtime, possibly looking at a second overtime. I mean, people were texting me left and right, what happens if it's tied at the end of overtime? I'm like, I kind of think they go to a second overtime here. They're not going to end in a tie in the Super Bowl here. Stu, what are your initial thoughts? Betting wise, game wise, or otherwise, what a cool game to watch tonight.
Yeah, well, I bet Chiefs on the last show, live on air with both of you right there with me. So obviously it was a range of emotions for me in the first half. Did not feel so good. In the second half, when that momentum was shifting, we suddenly felt so much better. And then once we got to overtime, CMC drives right down the field. Looks like they're going to kind of put the nail in it in the Chiefs defense, like they have all season long. Took a page out of your former Patriots. The bend, but don't break, worked to a T in this game. Field goals from both sides, obviously not something I expected coming into this one, but oh my God, what an absolute product. I mean, what kind of Super Bowl is it when I'm having legitimate discussions with everyone around me about whether it's going to be Juwan Jennings or Chris Conley who wins Super Bowl MVP? That's a legitimate discussion we were having.
It's wild. It's totally wild. I mean, it was a crap game if you're a casual football fan until it wasn't. Then it was just a great game for everyone. And man, just the storylines aplenty here. Kyle Shanahan again, possible clock management things that you can point to. There was some ref stuff that you can point to. I mean, there's just so much meat on this bone. We could talk about this game for the next month and not get tired of it. Mahomes now with 3 rings. The dude is incredible down the stretch, man. When they got that ball with under 2 minutes to go, you just knew that they were getting points.
Yep.
And I kind of was like, well, they're going to win. I thought they were going to win it outright in regulation there, because why wouldn't I? I have no reason to think otherwise at this point. That's what this guy does. But they at the very least get 3. And how hilarious is it that a missed extra point is what led us to this awesome end of overtime moment here with that clock clicking down just a little bit. And look, they were going to have enough time on the clock to run that field goal at the end. People that I was sitting next to were like, oh my God, it's running out of time. I'm like, it's going to end here in a second here. Relax. So, wow. I could go on and on and on. What is the biggest storyline for you coming out of this game?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the losers. For me, it's going to be, where do the 49ers go from here? That's my question, right? Because you did almost everything you need to do to beat Patrick Mahomes. I mean, you held this guy to field goal, scoreless first quarter. You were in command, 10-0 lead with the best running back in football, with one of the best O-lines there is, one of the best coaches there is. Where do we go from here? Because Brock Purdy didn't necessarily do anything wrong. Kyle Shanahan, someone that I've been very critical of, especially his in-game management throughout his career. This is from someone that's nailed this guy. He was spectacular today. I think Shanahan was fine. I'm curious. I haven't seen what you mentioned there as some criticisms. Maybe there are some floating out there. For me, Shanahan going out there And on that one play where he did not let the clock go down and switch quarters, he actually threw the ball before they did. I thought that was the sharpest play of the game by far. If you don't know, Shanahan's one of the most conservative guys in the league. The whole world, the broadcast was saying, don't go offside, don't go offside. No way they snapped the ball. Shanahan snapped it there. They got the first down. I thought he was killer today. I thought he was lights out. I didn't think he did anything wrong. Purdy was as good as you can ask a guy that was Mr. Irrelevant in the Super Bowl. So for me, after all that, it's like, what do we do from here? How do we get better? You can't keep Debo, Ayuk, CMC, Kittle. You can't keep all these guys. Now you got to pay Purdy. He's not going to make $100,000 anymore. He's not going to be living with the roommate anymore. What do we do after that? That's kind of what I'm seeing, because I love the Niners, but it's a tough one going forward. I don't know how you improve.
No, look, so you're not going to hear me criticizing Shanahan for that game. I think that was the best coached Shanahan Super Bowl that we've seen. And I'm including the Falcons OC job that led to the 28-3 comeback. But I did see some people chirping a little bit when they were only up, 10-7 or 10-6. Why aren't they running the ball? Why aren't they running the ball? Is this going to happen again? So they could have bled a little bit more clock and kind of ran that Christian McCaffrey train a little bit more early in the second half. But if you're, in my shoes, the way I look at it is you're not worrying about clock management that early in the half against the Chiefs. I mean, it's kind of irrelevant at that point. And that's something you're worrying about later in the game. I'm with you. Shanahan did what he had to do. Purdy did what he had to do. The Niners are lucky that they have Purdy on his rookie deal here for a few more years, making nothing. So that does help them. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of their window. So if they don't win it next year, I think you're going to see a real downturn for the Niners, because then it's going to be time to start paying everybody. And you just can't. That's not how it works in the NFL. These windows are so finite for these teams to go out and, win titles. So if you're a Niners fan, you got to be hurting tonight, because that was one you probably should have had. Wow. So here we go. Let's talk about next year's Super Bowl, Stu. Super Bowl 59, February 9th, 2025, to be played in New Orleans. And coming out of the gate, your Kansas City Chiefs are plus 550 to win a third straight Super Bowl. They are the favorites at the moment to win the Super Bowl next year. How could they not be? Coming into this game, the Niners were actually the favorites to win next year's Super Bowl, with the Chiefs in second. But now you got the Niners at plus 650. So just behind the Chiefs here, and as they should be, right? Still loaded. And look, Purdy's only going to get better from here. And I think Shanahan continues to, climb and become more skilled as a coach too, if it's even more possible. So between these two teams here, Stu, let's talk about it. KC or San Francisco here for next year's Super Bowl. If you had to bet on it right now, which way are you going?
Yeah, I think for me, it's hard actually. Because if it were in terms of value, if you bet right now, you're probably going to get more value over time on the 49ers, simply because they play in a worse division. So you're not ever going to see that odd spike of, they lose a game and now they're plus 1,200, right, to win the Super Bowl. The Chiefs do this thing every year. If you just wait to bet them mid-season, you can get them at 10-1, 12-1, 13-1. It wasn't even this year that was their worst regular season. They've had back-to-back slow regular season teams, because at the end of the day, when you've got a Ferrari in the garage, you don't have to take them out in week 1. Hey, you don't even have to take them out in week 8. This team doesn't even start trying until week 11. So for me, of course, is the Kansas City Chiefs, because I think they have a better chance to actually win the championship next year. But from a value perspective, they don't care about the regular season. So for me, for a team that frankly does not put the same amount of effort, game planning, they don't even need to make the 1 seed anymore. They've been fine with just the wild card in the last couple of years. To me, when you have a team like that, I would never bet them 550 before the season started, right? I mean, it's just part of the Andy Reid era of this team. It's classic at this point. So I do think the Chiefs have a better chance of winning. That's the team I would like to support. But I'm going to wait till they drop a couple games midway through the season, and then that's when we'll get a little bit creative.
So it looks like we may have lost you there, Stu, for a second. And it looks like we may have lost me. Am I completely frozen here? Stu, can you hear me? Hello, hello.
Oh,
Hey.
well, it's back to me now. I think Tommy is having a little bit of technical difficulties right there. But while he gets that sorted out, I see Hayden in the chat. Don't forget about Jordan Love next season. I don't want to spoil the show because I'm sure we're going to get to the Packers, and I'm sure those odds are something a lot of people are going to be interested in. But for me, I don't know if I'm going to be big on the Packers next season, to be completely honest. As a guy that I'm a big fan of Jordan Love, I'm a big fan of what they've got. I don't really like buying teams at the peak. And for me, you got a Packers team full of young, unproven guys, and you're going to be buying at the absolute peak next year. Defensive coordinator could come in and make a lot of changes. Joe Barry was a guy that probably, frankly, should not even be in the NFL coaching conversation right now. This is a guy that gave 300 passing yards to Bryce Young. So they can still go up from here, but I hate to buy high on a young team full of unproven pieces. I don't ever like to put my money on those guys before the season starts.
Apologies for the technical difficulties. I have no idea what just went over the air and what didn't. So we're just flying by the seat of our pants here, guys. It's live. It's the internet. Let's go. I heard you talking about the Green Bay Packers here at plus 2,000. That feels like a nice little sexy, maybe, quarter unit play here and see what happens, right? Because Green Bay, they got this young team. They're probably ahead of schedule for what they did this season. So like you mentioned here, you get the new defensive coordinator in the mix. You get another year of Jordan Love working with these young receivers. I don't hate it at plus 2,000. So let's go back to the top of the list here. We were talking about the Chiefs and the Niners. I love your assessment on the Chiefs here. You can probably get them at longer odds midseason like you could have this year. I would go ahead and just grab them now because who the hell knows? What if they have an insane – it is Mahomes, right? Like what if they go out and have a 13-4 season, which still feels weird to say. You never know, right? So I'll probably go bet $20 on the Chiefs at plus 550 after this broadcast just to do it. And then keep hammering it throughout the season because that's where you're going to continue to rack up dough if they do, in fact, win 3 in a row, which has never been done in the history of the NFL. But who knows? This guy is rewriting the history books here. Let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens here at plus 900. Yeah. And we can also talk about the Bills at plus 950. I see both of these teams kind of in the same tier where it's you need to win now or never.
Yep.
Now, I think the Bills are more so in that situation than Baltimore. I still think Lamar, he'll only be in year 2 of that offense. And obviously they had a great season, dominant season until they lost to Kansas City. So I think that Baltimore has a little bit more wiggle room here. But Buffalo, man, plus 950, it really is put up or shut up time. And of course, they're going to have yet another new OC in there for, have a whole off season of tinkering and figuring this thing out after the Ken Dorsey thing didn't work. So, maybe Buffalo has a different type of season. They have a higher seed and we see something different from Buffalo here. But it feels like their window is maybe just a tad open still here, right? Who knows what happens with Steph Diggs this offseason as well.
Yeah.
So it's another huge thing for them to figure out, although I do like their tight ends. But Bills, Ravens, what's your assessment at the moment here, Stu?
Yeah, for me, I hate to say it, I'm a fan of Baltimore, and if they just won that last game, you and me would probably be here popping champagne on the show because both of us were on the Lamar futures. We were on, or more specifically, the Ravens Super Bowl futures, like we talked about in our preseason show. And I like the Ravens a lot this year. All that to say, next season, man, when you get your coaching staff, taken away the way they did, not only did they lose their defensive coordinator, they also lost their assistant head coach, Weaver, over the offseason as well. So now we're down, obviously, in my opinion, McDonald is a defensive genius. Not a lot of people recognize this yet. I'm curious how he'll be as a head coach. Not all good coordinators are great head coaches, but this guy was able to take what most people considered a group of terrible veterans, pass rushers, and turned them in to the best pass rushing unit. I mean, when did Clowney do anything before this season, right? And it wasn't just him. This was a unit of 30-year-old second or third or fourth contract guys, and he generated free rushers at the highest level in the NFL, which is when you generate a pressure that's unblocked, right? So he was in the lab scheming, right? I like McDonald a lot, and I don't think people are realizing that this defense was spectacular. I mean, it was elite this season, and I don't think we see that same unit next year, especially obviously all the injury luck Baltimore's had over these last couple of years has been brutal. Maybe they've earned a little bit of good karma. So for me, not super interested in Baltimore at this price. The Bills, on the other hand, as you know, Tommy, I'm a big Bills fan. I'm a big Josh Allen fan. Not that I'm from the area or anything like that, but at the end of the day, I believe in betting on quarterbacks, and it's why I bet on Patrick Mahomes right before this game, and it's why I frequently bet on Josh Allen, because there are very few. In fact, in my opinion, there are only two quarterbacks that are on that elite level in the NFL right now, and it's Patrick Mahomes and it's Josh Allen. And hey, in my opinion, CJ Stroud will be there very early next season. Most people are not there yet. I am there right now. But for right now, Josh Allen plus 950, I like the value. I agree. I mean, they're going to be desperate, right? This is a year you have to spend. And right now, you're getting this number before any free agents have actually been signed. But like you said, if they lose this year, this whole regime is seriously changing. Not just coach, quarterback even, right? We could see like a whole start over. So I'm with you. They're going to spend the money. They're going to go after it. And all that's not necessarily accounted into the price right now because it just opened, right? We're not really thinking about that kind of stuff yet.
I'm kind of surprised Sean McDermott didn't get the can after this year too. I mean, when you lose an OC mid-season, that's almost kind of like the last gasp of air for these head coaches. Yep. And then if they have the disappointing playoff exit, you see them gone. And when I think about Harbaugh and McDermott, I feel like Harbaugh, the Ravens could lose in the AFC Championship game again next year, and I think Harbaugh is still going to be fine. It just feels like he's ingrained in that organization at this point. I wouldn't be 100% shocked if next year is his last year if they don't win it. McDermott, I'm really surprised that he is going to be their head coach next season. I wouldn't be shocked if early in the year, if they're 4 or 5 weeks in, they start like they did again this year and V gets the axe. Because look, I know they had their midseason thing. That article came out with the weird 9/11 story, and then they just turned it on, right? And then they had the run they had. But I don't think that should have saved his gig. You mentioned Houston plus 2,200 now to win the Super Bowl. We already talked about the Packers being in this tier. I think that the Texans, although the AFC is really, really hard, could be a team that surprises people and makes a deep playoff run. I would be really surprised if they won the Super Bowl next year because they're so young, and teams this young don't win Super Bowls. They just don't. But I do like them at plus 2,200 here because CJ Stroud is the real effing deal. I mean, we haven't seen a rookie play like this ever, really. If you look at the stats, it's kind of unprecedented. So to have that jump start in year one, now he's going to have that full year two offseason prep to get even better. They have a strong defense. They're going to be getting Tank Dell back. They got Nico Collins. They have young, talented guys on that roster. And DeMeco Ryans is the real effing deal. So I'm kind of talking myself into this one right now at plus 2,200. I don't hate it. I see this number going down. If you like the Texans, get it right now. Stu, what do you think?
Yeah, you're about to have me jumping out of my chair over here. I'm completely on board. Everything you were saying right there, I'm with you. And to be honest, if you've heard so far what I've been saying, you can kind of tell I am completely against buying high, right? The whole thesis behind what I do, right, if you want to put it in the simplest terms possible, is buy low, sell high. That is the goal of any market that you bet into, right? And I think the thing a lot of people are going to say is, look, you're buying high on the Texans, you're drinking the Kool-Aid. And what I'll say in response to that is, I don't think you can ever buy high on elite, like on truly elite talent, right? Oh, you're buying too high on Patrick Mahomes plus 550. They're not going to win. It's Patrick Mahomes, right? He can shift the narrative himself, right? You could have the whole defense get injured. And at the end of the day, in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes left, you sit there and you go, we got Patrick Mahomes, don't we? I feel pretty good about this, right? CJ Stroud, in my opinion, is a guy that's going to be in that conversation very soon. I truly believe there are two quarterbacks that can make any single throw on a football field right now, and only one of those guys has the maturity and the processing ability to not turn it over on half of those plays. And that's the guy we just saw win the Super Bowl. I think the Texans might have a guy that's following in his footsteps. So I agree, it's a young team, but at 22-1, you're giving yourself tons of hedging potential. You're giving yourself tons of opportunities. Like you said, I'm not the only one that can recognize this kid's good. A lot of people are going to recognize this kid's good, and a lot of people are going to bet on him. So I'm with you. Let's get this as soon as possible, maybe even right after I get off this show.
Right. And honestly, Patrick Mahomes was a D Ford fingernail away from playing in the Super Bowl in his first year as a starter, year 2 in the league. And then he won it the next year, right? And we've seen the run that Mahomes has been on. I'm not saying CJ Stroud is Patrick Mahomes, but what I am saying is what we saw him do in his rookie year was, as you mentioned, elite stuff. So I say it's unprecedented for a young team to win a Super Bowl. Mahomes did it in year 2 as a starter, and he was basically a second-year player at that point, right? Because he had the redshirt year with Alex Smith. So it's not the craziest thing in the world at plus 2,200. It really isn't.
And I was going to say, we made it this whole time. They had the defensive rookie of the year on the other side, Will Anderson. We went this whole time. Like, this team is young on both sides of the ball. And DeMeco Ryans, even though, listen, I've got some problems with your in-game decision-making, right? For that to be punished, you got to make the playoffs first. And this guy is a leader of men and a defensive genius out there, right? This guy is like, when you look in league circles, when you ask a couple beat reporters, especially if you hit a spring training maybe and go with the open bar still going, they'll talk about this guy forever. DeMeco Ryans is a slam dunk hire. That's a guy that you built. And now they retained their offensive coordinator, just like the Lions. Now they got another Ferrari in there as well, one of the highest paid offensive coordinators. Like, this is a good, sustainable setup, right? They're in the beautiful building process right now. And I'm excited to keep it going next season on both the offensive and the defensive side of the ball, because they got some dogs on defense as well.
Yeah, and look, that coaching continuity is huge. I'm really glad you brought that up. And clearly this front office knows what they're doing from a draft perspective. Nick Caserio drafted CJ Stroud, traded up to get CJ Stroud, Will Anderson. They're cooking with gas down there in Houston, man. I'm talking myself into this more and more by the minute. This number is going to go down. There's no question in my mind. Let's do a listener question here from YouTube. Our guy Hayden saying Bengals to win the Super Bowl with Burrow out this season. A lot of people forgot about how dominant they can be. We are looking at the Bengals here at plus 1,200. So towards that top half in the Super Bowl futures market here for Super Bowl 59. So they haven't been forgotten too much. And I could see this number kind of hovering in this range because of exactly what you said, Hayden. Burrow is out. And we saw what this team looks like without Burrow, which is above average, right? I mean, Jake Browning looked good, but they're not going to win a Super Bowl with Jake Browning. So if Burrow is healthy, this team is going to be competitive. We've seen that in recent years. That is what we have in the NFL. If your elite quarterback is competitive, you're going to make a deep run. The AFC is really loaded at the top, but Burrow is that good. So plus 1,200, I like the value. How can you not like that value with Joe Burrow being the player that he is and that team playing the way that they play when he is healthy? Although, look, when he is healthy, right? Do we know if that's going to be something that can hold true for a whole season for Burrow next year? You can't predict that. So, Stu, what do you think here about the Bengals? See, I almost called them the Chiefs because Burrow has that Mahomes-like swagger to me. He's probably the guy I would take second to Mahomes in any quarterback conversation right now, right? So plus 1,200 for the second best quarterback in the NFL. What say you?
Yeah, you're not going to like what I have to say then. I do not like the Bengals, one, because I'm not on that same level with Joe Burrow personally. I think Joe Burrow, I mean, I don't want to say anything too harsh right now. I think, okay, well, this is the nicest way I can say. I think Joe Burrow is closer to Brock Purdy than he is Patrick Mahomes, and I think it's a lot closer, right?
That's the hottest take that has ever been said on this show. Oh my God, go on.
I don't think it's that hot, man. I mean, Joe, like, look, they ran the same exact offense with Jake Browning as Joe Burrow. And obviously, he wasn't as efficient. But, I mean, Jake Browning had some really good games. And now suddenly you're not going to have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins one-on-one because you're not going to pay T. Higgins. So now Jamar Chase is going to be a guy that goes from a 50% double team, or sorry, a 30% double team rate. He's going to be in that Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill level of double time rate. So for me personally, when you look at it's not special on the defensive side of the ball. You got to realize if you look at the Chiefs on paper, the Chiefs this year, even with Patrick Mahomes, aren't a special offense. They're a special defense, right? That's the part that went so unsung about this whole Super Bowl, is that the 49ers had the better offense and the Chiefs had the better defense, right? When I look at the Bengals, my problems aren't just on the offensive side of the ball. We don't have any standout elite defenders. We have a couple solid pass rushers that are getting up there in age and are getting injured just as much as their franchise quarterback, right? So we got a guy like Joe Burrow who didn't have much mobility to begin with, right? But after 3 season-ending injuries, are we going to have much more going forward? To me, Joe Burrow has never even been close to a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen in terms of arm talent. So we don't have the arm talent. We don't have the mobility. I see a game manager. I see a guy that can't make a throw to every part of the field like a CJ Stroud, like a Patrick Mahomes can. And you can game plan against that. We've seen it with Purdy. We've seen it with Tua. When you're a limited quarterback, when you have something that you can't do at an elite level, that's going to be game planned against you when it matters the most. It might not punish you when all you're doing is checking the ball down to Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon in the regular season, but it's going to punish you when you have to make real throws in the postseason.
I love it. Look, I love the contrarian take here. I don't agree with it at all, but the one thing that I think I can get with here is the fact that with them being a Jamar Chase dependent offense next season, you are going to see that offense have to try and adjust and figure some things out. Now they're going to have an entire offseason to work on that, right? But it might be slow coming out of the gate here. And we've seen that with the Bengals for a couple of years here now. Obviously this year was kind of a wash, but the 2 before that, they didn't come out of the gate super hot. It took them a while to figure it out. I think that might be the same case here when you lose a guy like T. Higgins, and all of that attention is going to be on Jamar Chase here. So with that said, I am now cooler on the plus 1,200, but I'm not ready to put Joe Burrow in the same category as Mr. Irrelevant. I can't do it. I can't do it.
I was gonna say Tua at first, but I think Purdy
so disrespectful. Purdy did play great tonight. And let's just mention it again in case you live under a rock. The Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl in overtime, 25-22. Mahomes won his 3rd MVP, his 3rd ring. Incredible game. We are here talking about next year's Super Bowl, Super Bowl 59, going to be played in New Orleans on February 9th, 2025. It feels weird to say 2025 as like a thing we're previewing. So I feel old. But yes, Purdy looked good tonight. Purdy is a good quarterback. I'm not going to tell you that Purdy stinks. Hayden is asking here on YouTube, is Burrow below Tua? Are you ready to go that far here?
Yeah, it's not even that close. Like, I wouldn't even have to think about that. Burrow is obviously better than Tua, but for me, like, he doesn't deserve to be in that. I would say Jalen Hurts is maybe the tier he's in, but I think Jalen Hurts is a borderline 9th best quarterback in the league. So I'd probably have Burrow around 8. I think we got a Tony Romo to Drew Brees career trajectory, and I don't see him getting to Brees. I don't think he's that same kind of winner. I don't think he has the coaching around him, and I don't think he has the talent around him. So for me, I see us being a lot closer to Tony Romo, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Tony Romo could get his team where they need it to be. I think Joe Burrow can also do the same thing. But when I look at in depth, and if you don't believe me right now, if you're thinking this guy is a freaking idiot, what is he talking about? I've watched every snap of his career. Go back and put on the film. Even the best of the best of Joe Burrow's checking the ball down 5 yards at a time. His ADOT 5 every year. We're checking. He's Tua. He is Tua. That is exactly what he does. He checks the ball down and he lets everybody else go to work. And he gets all the credit for it. And we hate Tua, but we don't hate Burrow because Burrow does have some swag. And that does get you somewhere. He has some big game swag. Like, that's why I see getting a little closer to Breeze. But for me, we got Tony Romo with a little bit of swag, and I'm not betting on him to win a Super Bowl.
Amazing. So again, I don't want to turn this into an entire Joe Burrow show here, but I do remember watching a 20+ year career of a guy named Tom Brady that did a lot of that underneath the defense, Yak King type of stuff. And, Tom Brady had the career that Tom Brady had, and we talk about Tom Brady in a very different way than Joe Burrow. So again, let's just move on because we're never going to agree on this. And we have teams to cover. You brought up Jalen Hurts. Let's talk about the Eagles. You are not an Eagles fan. They're at plus 2,000 to win the Super Bowl. They were in this game last year. They flamed out in a glorious manner this season. Embarrassing loss in Tampa. I mean, it wasn't even close. So they bring all the coaches back. Sirianni's coming back here. Little bit surprising. People kind of thought he might be out after this year with how bad it got. I think that's another guy that could have a short leash next season, kind of like I said with Sean McDermott here. But you got the Eagles at plus 2,000 here, bringing everyone back. Is A.J. Brown going to be back? It seemed like it ended poorly there. Hopefully they repair that if you're an Eagles fan, because that guy's a beast. Stu, your thoughts on the Eagles at plus 2,000? I guess the way to word this here actually is, why should people fade the Eagles in the futures market here? Why should they bet on teams other than the Eagles? Because I know that's where you're going.
I hate the Eagles. I like this number. I'm throwing surprises all over the place. I've never let my affiliation to the District of Columbia cloud my eyes in sports betting, because if I did, I'd be dead broke right now. So I hate my DC teams. I've gotten over that. I don't like the Eagles at all, but I do like this number. You said it. They were in this game a year ago today, right? And when you look at this roster, my biggest problem is they didn't fire Sirianni. I would have easily made that decision. You are setting yourself up. I don't want to get too crazy. Are we thinking a week 4 firing and Bill Belichick coming in there, right in the shit, getting some professionalism in? I don't know.
I don't hate it.
I don't hate it either. I don't hate, because to me, the Eagles have everything to make themselves competitive in every game. Like they're a good, the offensive line, even without Kelsey, is still going to be very good. They still have a fantastic, if not the best offensive line coach over there. They draft well. They trade well. This is a smart organization, as much as it pains me to say it. For me, I would probably have them in that 14-15 to 1. I like them a lot better than the Bengals, especially when you compare them, right? The Bengals have to go through all those other terrible teams we just talked about. The Eagles have so much better hedging potential. I mean, the Eagles have to make it by the Cowboys, and they have to make it by the Lions, right? We're setting us up for some great hedging potential. I didn't think they would actually go over 20 to 1 personally, just because a lot of people love the Eagles. But for me, I think a lot of people are going to hate on the Eagles this offseason. I think they're going to say, look what we just saw this year. I think this is a team going in the wrong direction. I actually think it's a solid buy low opportunity. Even if, Sirianni is a bit of a clown over there, I fully believe that. You win games in the trenches, and the O-line, the D-line is very good. Fangio going over there for defense. He's not going to bring them any linebackers, but they'll do the bend but don't break. They'll do the 2 high safeties. It'll be an improved defense next year as well. So I definitely, actually, surprisingly enough, I like the Eagles at 20 to 1.
You're full of surprises tonight, man. So full of surprises. But it sounds like to me that you think that this number could actually get longer here as people kind of look in the other direction in this market, as the Eagles kind of look like the unfavored child here in the NFC East, which is where we'll go next. Another team that has been connected to Bill Belichick, another team that I think you could see Bill Belichick parachute in on if Mike McCarthy is out to a slow start here. Although Dallas, the last couple of years, slow starts have not been their thing, right? I mean, they've had great regular seasons here, whether it's Cooper Rush at quarterback or Dak for the whole season. Dak looking like an MVP at points this year, and they're at plus 2,000 here in the NFC East to win the Super Bowl for next season. So Dallas has a ready-made roster. We know they do. They have playmakers on defense. They have dudes on offense. Dak, I wouldn't say he's, an elite quarterback, but he's right there in that top 7-8 conversation, right? He's enough to win a Super Bowl, in my opinion. They just need to put everything else together. They looked lost in their game against Green Bay. I mean, it was atrocious. And I know that there was reports about the locker room being kind of on the edge here because of the Belichick McCarthy rumors and Dan Quinn. And, it wasn't a good situation in the locker room, but I don't think that's any excuse for how they played against Green Bay. And I think that's why this number is where it is right now. I was kind of surprised to not see them closer to that Bills Ravens number plus 900-ish. So Cowboys at plus 2,000 feel like a number that people should jump on now. I think that climbs throughout the offseason here, especially because it's Dallas, right? They're a very public team. So what say you here with the Dallas Cowboys? You're obviously a Washington fan, so you're going to take your Commander's hat off here. Give us your unbiased opinion of the Dallas Cowboys at plus 2,000 to win Super Bowl 59.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one. Another guy kind of similar to Joe Burrow without the swag, and Dak Prescott. Hey, Hayden saw what I was doing right there. I think it's pretty close there. I don't know if I have a strong take on that right now. Maybe Burrow, just because he does have the swag. Like you do have to give a little bit of credit, in the big games. Dak has not showed out in a big game yet. It's kind of hard to give him that right now. So I would give it to Burrow at the moment. But what I will say about this team is it's kind of hard to judge when you were an elite defense all year long. And then on the biggest stage, you got destroyed by a bunch of undrafted free agent wide receivers and Jordan Love, right? This wasn't like Patrick Mahomes you got dusted by. This was a team that every past performance in the history of sports would tell you the moment's too big for these guys. It was a good run. We love the Packers. They're done so, right? That's every narrative in history is telling you that's what happens when a team like the Packers somehow surprisingly makes it this far. But they beat them, and they beat them really bad. And for me, that kind of makes you go back to the drawing board with the Cowboys. So I don't know. For me, it's one of those things where the pass rush, if they can get back to that elite level, then I probably would like to support them. I think it's a lot better to focus. It depends on how much money you're betting, but you always want to have a good position to hedge when you're betting futures. You want to put yourself in a good position so when the Super Bowl starts and you look at the game, you can guarantee yourself some money either way. These NFC teams, you just have so much more hedge potential because you don't have to go through the ringer of Patrick Mahomes, of all these guys, the Josh Allens, right? You don't have to go through all those guys. So for me, just inherently, I'm going to think this number is too high. And exactly like you said, if you like the Cowboys, the whole world likes the Cowboys. They're America's team for a reason. This number is going to be 16-15 to 1 by closing. So I fully agree with you. If you like it, you should probably get it now. And kind of like you kind of teed me up for a little earlier, I think the Eagles might move up a little bit as well. But you got to remember, those Philly guys are crazy. They love their team. You're never going to talk them out of it. Dallas guys have so much self-hatred. They have so much internalized sadness that they don't even run. Like the Giants run to the bank to bet their team every year. I don't know if you look at those numbers. The Giants are the most bet future every single year, even over the Cowboys. So the Cowboys fans, they do hate themselves a little bit. But this might be your year. I would definitely consider that 20 to 1.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wish our guy Albert here, Analytics Capper, was going to be able to join us, but he is dealing with the possible birth of his third child tonight. I just went to check my text to see if we got an update, but nothing from him, which probably means he's with a to-go bag in the car racing to the hospital. So hopefully it's all, rocking and rolling over there in the greater Dallas area. And maybe he should go grab Dallas at plus 2,000 right now. Maybe I'll text him and be like, hey, I know you're busy, but go grab this before you can. All right, I'll throw some teams out here. Just going to list them out, and then you can pick which one you want to go with here, because I think they're all kind of in the same tier in my mind here. New York Jets at plus 2,500, right? Aaron Rodgers coming back, really strong defense. They got some dudes on offense that if they could actually get the ball thrown to them, maybe they could make some plays. The Los Angeles Chargers, Justin Herbert. I know you are a fan of Herbert. Now they get Harbaugh, but Harbaugh seems to be a guy that can handcuff a quarterback sometimes. Although, look, he revived Alex Smith's career. He did what he did with Kaepernick. So who knows? He did what he did with Andrew Luck at Stanford. So it's kind of a mixed bag with Harbaugh and quarterbacks. But the one thing that is true with Harbaugh is that when he goes places, he turns around the program and they start to win. And then you get the Jacksonville Jaguars at plus 3,000, a team with talent, as we know. Lawrence can be great, can be mediocre. And Doug Peterson is a much better coach than Urban Meyer, right? So they got that going for them still. So you got 3 teams here I think are kind of on that tier B of NFL squads heading into next season. I don't think either of these 3 teams, any of these 3 teams, are going to win the Super Bowl. Of those 3, who do you want to talk about here? Chargers, Jets, Jags. Pick your poison. You could hit all 3 if you want.
Yeah, I'll start with the Jets. For me, the thing is, the Jets are the perfect kind of team I would bet on. Like the way they're structured, they're not going to be popular. We don't like them. And like I said, you want to look at the trenches. I mean, the offensive line is kind of rough. That defensive line is going to be good, and it's going to be good for years to come. So for me, if you focus on loading up the offensive line, which like it doesn't take a genius, you have a 40-year-old quarterback that's getting injured every year, right? If you don't build up your offensive line, there's some serious malpractice. But I also need to see what we're doing with our backup quarterback. I need to see a full organizational plan before I move forward. Imagine I'm the New York Jets advisor. You failed your first assignment, right? So before I write any check off to you, right, I need to see a full game plan. I need an itemized list of who we're drafting, what we're focusing on, and I need an apology letter so that we don't make the same mistakes we made this year. So at the time being, I like the build they have, but I'm not a big fan of, a 40-year-old quarterback having to make it the whole year healthy. It hasn't happened before. The offensive line is not good right now. It's the most obvious thing in the world that they have to build it up, but it's very hard for me to back the Jets at this number. I really just have no interest until we see how they approach this offseason. Ransom kind of covered in short right there. The Jets do suck. And if you're a Jets fan, I'm sure you know that as well. And you mentioned me loving Herbert. That's another thing I'm gonna have a lot. There's gonna be sleepless nights over this number this offseason. I bet him. The Chargers and the Ravens were my bets this year. It's going to be hard for me not to do it again. Harbaugh wins, and he wins fast. He's a grinder, right? Like, you get a little bit of tired of Harbaugh after 3 or 4 years, but those first couple of years, he's got everyone in the building going on 1,000 right there. And that's exactly what the Chargers need, because they have the talent, but they don't have the special teams. They don't do the little things right. They're more penalized than other teams. All these little things that kind of kill a team as a whole. But I do believe, I don't know if Justin Herbert's an elite quarterback, but he's a guy for me. Like I wouldn't even really have to think. I would take him over Joe Burrow pretty quickly, because at the end of the day, when you look at arm talent, when you look at just pure ability as a passer, he's on an elite level, right? And I know a lot of teams are going to say, well, look at the weapons he's had. For me, I think when you look, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams have not made it. Neither of these guys have made it a full season in 3-4 years, maybe 4 of the past 5.
Maybe
years.
Their entire career.
Yeah, exactly, quite possibly. But even when these guys are on the field, there's no speed. They've never once had speed. And then to try to fix that, they drafted Quentin Johnson, a guy who runs a 4.4. But if you looked at his route tree in college, 50% of the guy's yards were on screens. He never ran a route to save his life. They checked the ball down to him, and he ran straight. So when they drafted this guy, he did exactly what he could do in college, which is not catch the ball. So for me, the drafting has been a problem. We're aging now. Apparently, Khalil Mack is going to be actually available to trade for because they can't afford to pay this guy. So I like the Chargers. I like the talent, but this is another team that we're going to have to wait and see what they do in this offseason, because they're a budget Bills. If they don't win this year, everything's done. We need to mix things up massively, because Herbert is so insanely talented. And obviously another losing season would be just unprecedented with this squad.
Yeah, Burrow catching another stray there in your Los Angeles Chargers assessment. So that was funny. All right, Jacksonville.
I don't even think that one's controversial. Trevor Lawrence could be controversial, but I don't know what to do with Jacksonville, man. I don't think Joe Burrow is better than Trevor Lawrence. He was the first overall pick.
This is just a Joe Burrow measuring contest now. Every team.
Well, my problem is I haven't seen Trevor Lawrence get a single cent better since his freshman season at Clemson. And I saw him in his freshman season. I was like, this is the best quarterback I've ever seen before. Like, this guy is going to be generational. And then he never once improved since then. So I don't know. Trevor's a tough one. This Jags team, they've got some talent on both sides of the ball, but they're not going to be elite on offense or defense. When you look at the wide receiver core, Calvin Ridley's the guy that might come back. He might not. I know it depends on the finances over there. Christian Kirk, okay. Zay Jones, okay. Evan Ingram, like Etienne is solid. Like they've got they've got some names. The offensive line wasn't great this season. I know they dealt with some suspensions, some injury problems. Jacksonville's just in kind of that ugly dead zone of like, I don't know what to expect of them, but I do know that they're in a little bit of an easier division. I mean, the Texans are not the Texans we thought they were, but I mean, it's not like, well, I guess Richardson could be really good. I don't know how good the Titans are going to be. Like, it's just kind of they're a mediocre team. I think they're a middle of the road kind of team. And I don't think they're going to do anything exceptional in free agency, but it feels like another team that has to. Like, we got to mix it up. I don't know what's the problem. I was a big fan of the coaching, but Peterson, I think, was kind of middle of the road this year. This is just kind of I don't know about you. It's a very middle of the road team for me. Like, I feel like they're going, 9 and, 8 or whatever. You're going to have an okay season, wild card. Maybe they win the wild card, maybe they don't, but nothing I'm chasing to bet on right now.
Yeah, they're going to have runs every year. I feel like they're going to have that 4 or 5 week stretch every year. They're going to steal a game in conference where we're like, oh, wow, maybe we should think about Jacksonville. And then, like you said, Trevor Lawrence hasn't gotten better since he started his college career. And I was with you, man. When that guy was slinging it at Clemson, I'm like, this guy's only a freshman? Oh, my God. I thought he was going to be the second coming, and it just never happened. So I'm with you here. Let's shoot back up the board here and talk about 2 teams that we skipped over just because things were flowing. My internet crapped out for a second. Who the hell knows? The Detroit Lions at plus 1,200 and the Miami Dolphins at plus 1,700. 2 teams I am fascinated in heading into next year because Miami – it really feels like they have a ceiling with Tua. And I know when it's clicking with Tua, it looks good, but it doesn't click towards the end of the year, man. It happens every single season. And look, even towards the end of his Alabama career, it didn't work out because he couldn't stay healthy. And I know health wasn't necessarily the reported issue towards the end of the season here, but there was a noticeable change in his game. And he doesn't play well in cold weather either. So it's going to be hard when all of the good teams in the AFC play in cold weather cities for you to get to the Super Bowl, unless you're the number 1 seed, which they had a chance to do, but he started playing like crap down the stretch. So Miami at plus 1,700 feels like a bad bet to me. I don't like that number at all. And then Detroit, we talked about it last week, a team that was ahead of schedule. They have a ton of talent. Do I trust Jared Goff to continue to be the guy there? I guess. The Lions I've had a complicated relationship with all season. So I want to hear your thoughts on both of these teams. They're kind of both in different spots, but they're in that same tier here odds-wise. And I don't really know what to do with either one of these teams.
Yeah, man. I mean, you kind of nailed it, I think, perfectly with your Miami call of they have a ceiling, right? Like, I truly want someone that loves, because you hear a lot of smart people find their way to any team, right? Because there's a lot of opinions, a lot of data, a lot of metrics you can look at. I'm not saying this sarcastically. I would love someone really smart, to sit down across from me and explain to me why anyone would make this bet. Like, truly, because watch their games. They didn't beat a single good team last season. They beat the teams they were supposed to. They won at home. They won in controlled, safe environments. And then anytime you gave this team any sort of adversity, they crumbled miserably. It wasn't even close. They crumbled miserably. So now you go back, they're 17-1, right? In the same division as Josh Allen. And you want me to go back to the board again after they just maybe if we had got a new quarterback, right? But I don't know. To me, Tyreek Hill is awesome. He's going to keep being awesome. But also look at this offense. Whenever they're losing, with how much motion they run to get Tyreek Hill open on every play, try watching those games when they're down 10. It takes them 35 seconds to get a play going. Then they got to run a really slow play where Tyreek Hill gets in motion. This team is not built to be trailing. They're not built to face adversity. The defense got better, and now you're losing your defensive coordinator immediately after a season. So for me, the defense could maybe carry this team if that's the argument you want to make, but at 17-1, I really don't see any value there. And it's interesting. The Lions are another, I think when you talk about comparing quarterbacks, I mean, I think I'd rather have Jared Goff over Tua, but they're in the same kind of category to me where they're both capped. They're very capped. They are game managers, right? And when you get to the playoff, that bites you in the butt. And I know the Detroit Lions are ahead of schedule this year in the sense that this is when they, we didn't expect them to make it here. But once you do, Dan Campbell said it himself. Once you make it here, it's 10 times harder to make it back, right? And sure, ahead of schedule in theory from before the season started. But once you get there, that's your chance. You don't get many chances to win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. So in my opinion, when you're that close, when you have the lead, that's your opportunity to win. I don't want to chase that loss next season. I'm not a big fan of some of their more hyped up players. I think Aiden Hutchinson is going to be in the Hall of Very Good. I don't think he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I think he's like a very, very above average pass rusher, but I don't think he's like a Myles Garrett Defensive Player of the Year guy like people are going to hype him up to be. Brian Branch, solid, but beyond that, that's not a strong defense at all. I mean, every single one of their corners was, a very rough rating on PFF, and it showed in the eye, in the eye test. So for me, neither of these two teams I'm very interested in buying at all. I think these are, very easy passes for me.
This is just a random thought that popped in my head. They picked 29th, I believe, in this upcoming draft. If Penix is still there, why wouldn't Detroit take a shot on Michael Penix Jr.? I mean, Goff is not the future. He really isn't. And you have this young roster with talent. Gibbs is great. Laporte is great. Amon-Ra St. Brown is an absolute beast.
Yeah.
Take a flyer on Penix. And I know Goff has done what he's done for you to get you in this position, but he was always going to be the bridge. And I think things just happened and everyone bought in, and the skill guys ended up being better and more ahead of schedule than Detroit planned. And now they're in this weird spot where Jared Goff just brought them. Basically, they should have been in the Super Bowl, right? The Niners came back. The Detroit blew that game. So I don't hate taking Penix there late in the first round if he's still hanging around. I think he might be hanging around at that point, right? So
yeah,
just a thought. Just a thought.
I think for me, the biggest problem with that is like, one, the year to do it was last year. That when you had the pick, you were in the top 10. You could have taken your choice of guys. I believe the same thing about the Seahawks, right? When you were up there, you had the Richardson, the Strouds in your grasp. It took one trade up, and that was your guy. And then you could sit him behind Jared Goff for a season. For me, the Lions are kind of the perfect team to sit a young quarterback, and let them watch for a year. To me, like, this draft isn't great for that. There's one name that would fit that very well. And people don't know this guy is going to be a top 15, maybe a top 10 pick, but JJ McCarthy is the guy. And I think that would be a home run pick for the Lions. But they're not in that spot anymore because, like I said, the mocks haven't caught up yet. I'm going to post one soon. People are going to be real mad. JJ's going in the top 15. I think he's going in the top 10. I really do. And the consensus is like way off, but he's a young guy that needs to sit for a year or two. He'd be perfect to run the Shanahan system of offense that is very similar to the run heavy style they played in Michigan. Like, to me, that is the spot where I'd want him to go. Penix is a guy that you can start faster, right? I mean, him and Bo Nix are the other guys in that kind of tier if they're not the elite quarterback. These are multiple year starters that are going to be older or as old as Joe Burrow coming into the league, right? I don't want those guys to sit a year. You want to get value out of the rookie contract. For me, I think JJ would be the pick to go, but I think he's actually going to go before him. I just don't think, the consensus is quite there yet.
All right, I'm going to run through a big list of teams here, and then you tell me which 1, 2, 3 you want to talk about. But I'm just going to run through them, and then we'll get out of here. Bears plus 3,000. Falcons plus 3,000. Rams plus 3,500. Browns plus 3,500. Colts, Anthony Richardson, people. He's good. Plus 4,500. Yeah. Vikings plus 5,500. Seahawks plus 6,000. Buccaneers plus 6,500. Steelers plus 7,500. Cardinals plus 8,000. I don't hate it. I'll give you guys a reason why. Saints plus 8,000. Commanders plus 10,000. Giants plus 10,000. Pats plus 10,000. That's actually moved. They were at plus 15,000. I don't know why. Raiders plus 10,000. Broncos plus 10,000. Titans plus 15,000. I'm curious why the Titans are lower than some of these teams, honestly. And the Panthers at plus 25,000, the worst team in the NFL this past season. So I just gave you a big list here. Have at it. Yeah. Any of those teams worth your time? Any thoughts you got?
I think two of the biggest ones are the Falcons and the Colts. I think for me, the Falcons, like we know, they're in a position they could have had Lamar Jackson last offseason. They obviously decided they were too good for the two-time MVP. They don't need a guy like that on their team, too quarterbacky, no way we can have Lamar. Instead, we obviously have superstars like Desmond Ridder in house. And that's how you waste a year of being a rebuilding team. So for me, like, do I trust your ownership? Do I trust the GM? Probably not. But when you look at it, this team has a lot of weapons. They have a good offensive line, and they have a defense that, while they did lose their defensive coordinator, which in my opinion was a very big underrated blow, he had that secondary playing way above their means. I still think this is a solid roster that's a quarterback away. And for me, that's a kind of team that does become interesting in a market like this. The quarterback is going to have the biggest impact. If they get, someone like a Matthew Stafford, not that he's on the block, but what he did for the Rams a couple of years ago, that's suddenly going to move your odds a lot. And that's something we could see here. I think Kirk Cousins is going to be the biggest name attached. And I think if the Falcons did have Kirk Cousins, I would have a little bit of interest in them. So I think that's going to be a big one to monitor. For me, the Colts is one I want to bring up because, man, exciting young team. Steichen, I think, had a phenomenal showing as a coach this year. I believe we're going to talk about him as a top 5 coach next year and someone that I will be betting to win coach of the year. My biggest problem is that Anthony Richardson, like, he's really good, but I'm really scared to bet him season long because not only is he an injury risk simply from his extreme style of play, but I did a lot of reading into the style of surgery that he had. And a lot of the doctors, especially the really well-respected ones that I follow, were saying this wasn't a regular surgery. This was a little bit more complicated. There could be some, throwing effects that, take us into this season. So for me, there's a couple health red flags. There's not really much elite talent on this team outside of the coach, outside of the coaching staff. So for me, I think the Colts are going to be a team that's super popular as an underdog this year. I love them. I'm going to bet on them in the regular season. I don't have that much interest in laying, an injury-prone quarterback. Even if Gardner Minshew is still there next year, he is a sick backup. People are going to love this team, and I don't want to hate on him. I know why you would love this team, but for me, it's just one that I'm going to have to wait till regular season rather than, a whole season-long market.
All right, Cardinals at plus 8,000. Just give me a second here. Kyler Murray, full season, right? Gannon had those guys playing hard. The Cardinals did not get blown out the way that we thought they were going to get blown out all season long. They just didn't. They beat the Cowboys pretty handily early in the year, if you guys remember. So the Cardinals are headed in the right direction. The arrow is pointed in the right direction. They got Kyler coming back, as I mentioned, and they have the number 4 pick in the draft. What if they get Marvin Harrison Jr.? And this guy is going to be the game changer that everyone thinks he's going to be. And you're playing in the NFC, which is weaker than the AFC. We all know this, right? The Cardinals, I think, immediately become a very interesting team to go out and possibly make the playoffs next year. And then when you're in the dance, it's anyone's ball game, right? So, I don't know. You get a full off season of Kyler being healthy, working with the new coaching staff, everyone buying in. You get Marvin Harrison Jr. possibly in that 4th spot. He's your next Larry Fitzgerald for the next 15 years. I'm just saying, plus 8,000 is pretty juicy here. No, are you buying what I'm selling here?
I am. I think this is a little aggressive, obviously, but we know that if you're making it an 8 to, or 80 to 1,
you're not putting $1,000.
Exactly. So, but for me, like, if you are betting serious money, like, the win total is very interesting to me. Gannon, it's like he's got these guys ready to go. And it's crazy because all the, preseason stuff made him look like the biggest nerd on the planet, right? But to me, Gannon profiles in the same DeMeco Ryans, Dan Campbell, leader of men, motivator, get your guys going. I don't know how he does it. I truly have no clue. Look at the roster. Look, I don't know if you're a Madden player or something. The beginning of the season, pull up the ratings for every defensive player, and then go find your friend that knows more football than any of your other friends and try to ask him to name more than one defensive player on that Cardinals unit. And he had them playing like a real unit. He had them playing like a really good team. And then look what happened to the Eagles when their defense lost him, right? They fell off an absolute cliff. 2 corners who look like 2 of the best corners in the league, who got mega extensions, look like 2 of the worst corners in the league. Bradbury got benched halfway through the season. Like, I have no clue what magic Gannon's got going. He could just be a really good coach at the end of the day. I have no clue, but I agree. And I like Kyler Murray. I think he's a little disrespected from these guys. I don't know. Just being a short, mobile quarterback injury prone is obviously something that scares me, but 80-1 is a very solid number for a team that has a surprising amount of talent. And you mentioned it, the draft, they got the capital, they got the money. They could spend a little bit. They could kind of
and dudes like to play in Arizona. Like they've signed guys in the past, right? And they've been aggressive in the trade market in years. Guys don't mind playing for the Arizona Cardinals here. So I'm just saying, man, I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl, but it's worth a look at plus 8,000 in my book. So, all right, we've gone over an hour here talking about a game that is going to be played a year from now. So that's enough content for y'all. Thank you for joining us all season long here on the Opening Line Report. It has been a blast to do this on Sunday nights after Sunday Night Football. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you guys have too. I hope it's helped you win some bets throughout the season. And look, basketball, hockey, college basketball, it's our focus here at OddsTrader moving forward. We'll have some off-season stuff for you, futures as always, but you want to win bets tomorrow, right? So download the OddsTrader app, get in there. It's the best in class sports betting predictive AI in the business. It's going to help you be a better. And let's keep this thing rolling. The betting high is at an all-time high on Super Bowl night, right? You hit all your props. You're feeling good. Keep it rolling. Why not? It's right there for you. So if you're not a big basketball guy, you're not a big hockey guy, it's okay. We have the tools for you. OddsTrader.com, the App Store, OddsTrader, Google Play if you're an Android guy, OddsTrader. It's all there. Go do it. Stu, any final thoughts as we wrap up the season here?
Yeah, it was a fun season. I hope we help you guys make a little bit of money. You know, if you want to argue with me about any of the things I said today or all season long, I would love for you to try to prove me wrong. Because at the end of the day, all I'm trying to do is, win you guys some money and make some bets. So if you want to send me clips of your favorite Joe Burrow throws and tell me how dumb I am, feel free to do it. I'll swing back, baby. I'm ready to go. But it was a very fun season. We gave out a lot of props. The prop winners were very good if you tailed that section of the show. Not easy to do a week in advance. So I was very proud of that. I think it was a great year. If you enjoyed any of the content, I'm live Monday, Wednesday, Friday, past the prop over on YouTube. And I'm free on Twitter. You get like 3 guys that still give out free plays in 2024. It's probably going to be 2 guys. My cousin Jerry's probably going to be off the web in a new VIP Discord next year. So you don't got many guys like me. It's free. You might as well go check it out along the way.
Love it, man. You've been great. And hopefully we're back here next football season talking about everything. So that's going to do it for the Opening Line Report for Super Bowl 59, Super Bowl 58. Again, an all-time classic. The Kansas City Chiefs winning 25-22 at the very, very, very end of overtime. What a ball game. Football is awesome. We're going to miss it, and we're going to miss you. We'll talk to you next football season.